I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Syria. Doubts about the president's handling of Bashar al-Assad, the suspect chemical weapons attack of August 21st in Damascus. The resolution so far using the representatives of the Russian Federation to negotiate with Damascus, with Assad, and tracking this story into the United Nations Security Council. All of that is prelude to a question that is raised very clearly in The American Thinker by Abe Katsman. Abe is writing from Jerusalem. He's a commentator who lives there. He's an American attorney. And I'm watching this story from the point of view of the Israeli people as they're watching for the conversation between Washington, Moscow, and Damascus. Because behind all this, really the theater behind the theater, is Iran. Abe, a very good evening, good morning to you. The question here, right to it, and it's in your American Thinker piece, is the implications of what you call the Syrian episode for Iran. Interpret, please. A very good evening to you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. The issue in terms of Iran is that people, especially in Israel, and many people who view foreign policy, look at this episode and say, well, if the president acted this way in terms of his dithering and hesitation and ultimate non-commitment to his own commitment of a red line in Syria, then what are we to make of his commitments regarding Iran? What are we supposed to make of his nuclear red line in terms of the Iranians? If he doesn't follow through on Syria, how sure should we be that he's going to follow through on Iran?
That's a good question. I do not have the answers. We know that the Prime Minister of Israel is heading to Washington the end of September to confer with the president. There are many press reports, I take none of them sincerely, of offers or gestures by the newly elected president of Iran. Pretty soon we can expect he'll be on some morning show on American networks, speaking crisply about the new day. Iran has a motive to act like a very peaceful lamb these days. The United Nations Security Council sanctions, just as Assad had a motive to act like a peaceful lamb after the allegation of a chemical weapons attack. There are 100,000 dead. So the puzzle here is, does Israel trust this dialogue? Is this a turn in the road, or is this more of the confusion, the fog of war?
I believe Israel is very concerned that too much of the world is buying into the sincerity of the Iranians. Israel, if the Iranians are sincere, fine, let them dismantle their nuclear program. But in the meantime, it looks like they're buying time. And worse, it looks like much of the world is willing to sell them that time that they are looking to buy. They, especially the Obama administration, does not seem keen on confronting Iran and seems to be looking for any excuse they can to go along with these games of buying more time, whether it's through additional sanctions or playing games with the sanctions or now having a new so-called moderate in charge in Tehran that they might be able to, that they think they might be able to get somewhere with.
The American Thinker piece you publish, you focus on an opinion piece written by Jeffrey Goldberg, the very well-known American commentator who often has remarks about the American Jewish community and Barack Obama and the Obama administration. And in this instance, if I go to the Bloomberg View for Mr. Goldberg, I'm just being straight up. I'm not interpreting him. The straight up is that don't think that the president's handling of the red line in Syria is how he will handle the red line in Iran. Is this metaphor red line? Has it disappeared, Abe? Is it a punchline in late night television in Israel?
It somehow is the right term. Jumped the shark. I think that it's gotten to the point where it's probably overused as shorthand for a whole bunch of discussions about the actual intention of the Obama administration and the seriousness with which it takes its commitments. The bigger problem from Israel's standpoint is not so much the linguistics as it is what the actual intentions are of the Obama administration when it comes to carrying out its commitments. They made a very public commitment with this red line, and the fact that they backed away from it, now Jeffrey Goldberg suggests not all red lines are equal. But if that's the case, how are we supposed to know which are which? What does this mean for American allies in Taipei, in Seoul? And I think that especially in Israel, where Israel has already had some experience with the Obama administration backing away from American commitments in terms of positions that America promised it would take in peace process negotiations. In Israel, I think this has caused a great deal of loss of credibility, and ultimately, I think it's going to crush what little chance there is of any kind of success in the peace process, because there is very little. The Israelis are just not going to rely on shaky commitments that they don't believe that the Americans are going to carry out, and those commitments are probably the only things that could bridge the gaps between the Israeli negotiating positions and those of the Palestinians.
Finally, Abe, right now, we do not know the results from this lengthy negotiation with Moscow. Russia playing a part. There are lots and lots of former Soviet citizens living in Israel. What's been the general reaction in the Russian language papers, in the parts of Israel that are dominated by Russians themselves?
There is a certain grudging respect for Putin. I don't think that people like him very much, but they take him seriously. He's a force. I'm not going to pretend that I read the Russian language papers, but that seems to be my impression from speaking to a number of people who are of Russian origin.
Respect for Mr. Putin, is that also extended now to the Obama administration, or is there a changing relationship? Well,
there's, the respect for Putin is not necessarily a positive. It's there's an element of fear. There's an element of that this is a representative of exactly the kind of government that these people once lived under. The difficulty with the Obama administration, from the standpoint of I think that most of these people look at the Obama administration as being very naive. And really being played by the Soviets, but that's almost what it's like, by Putin and the Russians.
Abe Katsman is an American attorney living in Israel. He's a commentator there, writing most recently in The American Thinker. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.